for tuning in. I hope you're all doing well. Today I just wanted to bring you another gouache study, this time of a few mouths. I know I said last time that I felt ready to do a portrait, but I thought just a little bit more study wouldn't hurt. If you're subscribed to my channel, you might remember a week or two ago I put out a video setting up my gouache palette, and this is the first time that I have used it. So I'll talk a bit about that in this video. But if you are new here and you're interested, I did set up my own gouache palette. You can just see to the left of the screen there, and that's where I've let my gouache dry down and then I've re-wet it whenever I want to use it, rather than using gouache straight out of the tube. Now, I did talk about this in my last gouache study, but I want to talk about it now. The ugly phase. Look at this painting right now. I have just started refining it on the second layer. The first layer that you saw before was the base layer, and it did not look good. And this is just a reminder to keep practicing, to have faith that the ugly phase can be a necessary step to get to the final product. In my last study where I painted eyes, I talked about how I really struggled with painting a darker skin tone. I just felt like I didn't have my colour theory there, and since then I did talk also about getting a different colour, which is burnt umber, which is right there, and I felt a lot better this time painting this darker skin tone. I just felt like I was able to get the right tones in there. I was just refreshed on my colour theory, so it was really nice to feel a bit better this time about my ability to paint darker skin tones, and I feel like it's a step in the right direction of being able to be more confident and more inclusive in my artwork. Now, if you do follow me over on Instagram, or if you followed my YouTube for a while, you might know that I generally paint pretty grumpy looking people. I don't paint smiles or anything like that. Normally it's a bit of a solemn kind of look on people's face and their mouth is always closed. So I enjoyed painting this mouth the most, but that's also why I chose for the other two mouths to have tongues out and teeth showing and things that I'm not comfortable with. So as I said, I did use my gouache palette for this painting for the first time, and I gotta be honest, I really enjoyed it overall. I did wet the paints with a little squirt bottle a few minutes before I wanted to start painting and let them sit for a while. Overall, I had no issue reaching the opacity that I wanted with my paints. I work in layers, so the first layer is always a bit washy, which is kind of the norm with gouache unless you go in with a really opaque, fresh coat of paint, which isn't how I like to use it personally, unless that's just one flat colour for a background that I intend on using. Now let's quickly jump back to what we were saying before, the ugly phase. Look at it now. I love looking back at the ugly phase and seeing how the painting came together, and sometimes I look at it and go, how did I turn that into this? So I'm really happy with how this one turned out, and now let's get on to the next one. So here I decided to do the base layer for both of these paintings, and whilst I don't regret it, I do kind of regret the fact that you're going to have to look at the base layer and the ugly phase of the one on the left for the entirety of me painting this one here on the right. But as I've now mentioned a couple of times, yes, I'm using my new palette, and I realised how quickly I stopped being precious about not contaminating the paints. I didn't really find it to be an issue, and I found it pretty easy to clean them off if I needed to. I mean, like things with like a yellow, I'd be more careful about not getting a blue in it or a bright kind of contrasting colour. And towards the end, painting this last one that I'm just doing the first layer on now, I did end up putting a little bit of fresh white on my palette just to get that really bright white, because I found it was just so hard, even when I tried to keep my white clean, to get that really just opaque bright white. If you are enjoying this video, please do consider subscribing. I do put out videos pretty much every week at the moment, and it really puts a smile on my face every time I see I've got a new subscriber. At first I was worried that I'd picked two images that were too similar with the two open mouths, but I realised that the tone of the lips was so different and there was just different colours, and in the end I found them really different to paint, and I actually really struggled with the one on the left a lot more. One thing that I can't emphasise enough that I've learnt whilst working with gouache is letting the layer underneath dry before you move on to the next layer, or you will pick up too much paint and end up with an almost bald patch on your painting that you have to rework later. I struggled with that quite a bit for the third painting, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I found with all the paintings it was the white highlights at the end that really pulled the paintings together and made them look more complete. I loved painting this one right here because I got to use such bright, vibrant reds. It was so nice to lay down those really bright colours, and I'm realising that I don't really use bright colours that much in my palette, and maybe that's something I should change up. With these paintings there was a lot of going back in and refining and then reblending and then adding in the same colour, and I'm not sure if that's what a lot of people experience with gouache or if that just shows maybe a bit of my inexperience with gouache and me trying to get the right colours down, and maybe I'm taking the long way around, I'm not sure. But I'd say these paintings took around an hour to an hour and a half each, and I do often cut out quite a bit of the mixing time in these videos as well. When I paint I always have some tissue in my hand and I need to change that over to a towel, but I am always dabbing off my paintbrush, whether that's to get some water off it or to get some colour off it. So you can see me holding that in my right hand sometimes whilst I paint. I also find it pretty important to have that in my hand when I'm blending colours, because as I pull one colour into the other it will slowly pick up that paint onto the paintbrush, and to be able to keep on going in with a clean paintbrush to make sure that those colours blend well is pretty important. I don't really know how to explain how I blend very well, but maybe I'll try and show it better in a future video. I'm pretty happy with how the texture on the bottom part of the tongue turned out, but the more that I look at it, the more that I feel like it kind of just reminds me of a whale shark from the top of the tongue. I don't know if that's just me, but it kind of looks like a whale shark. Whale sharks aside though, I do think this one turned out alright. One thing that I noticed is it's amazing how much shading goes into teeth. Often these teeth are really white because they were images that I pulled off Pinterest, and they were probably edited so the teeth were really white as well. Even though the entirety of the teeth looked pretty darn white, they still had really stark white highlights, so I did need to bring down the tone of the teeth a bit in general so those highlights would pop. And to do that I just mixed a bit of a cool blue with some white, and it was a really light colour, but it just allowed those white highlights to pop against the teeth. This painting was the first one that I did struggle a bit actually getting that opacity that I talked about before. I used the rose violet to start with to try and get the colour for the lips, and it just could not get to an opacity that was what I'm used to with gouache. And then I did end up going in with a primary magenta, but again I still struggled to get an opacity going, and I don't know if it's the magenta colours or if I was doing something wrong, but using that primary magenta was straight out of the tube and I still had some difficulty there, so that's a mystery. I started painting the second layer of this one on Monday, and today is now Sunday, and I avoided continuing it for almost a week because I was just struggling to get any volume to the painting, making like any sense of depth kind of appear within the painting. So what you're currently watching is my Monday painting session, and I found that I kept trying to add in reds, even cooler reds, to try and improve that opacity while still having a vibrant colour, and it just wasn't giving me what I wanted based off the reference image. And now we have moved to today's painting session. Sorry, it looks a little dull here, but I think it corrects in just a moment. I pretty quickly realised that I was just focusing too much on just the lips and trying to create depth within them. So I moved on to trying to create more depth within the rest of the painting and started adding more layers to the tongue. I really enjoyed painting the underside of the tongue because it had so many different colours in it, and it was nice just to play with more colour and mix them all together and practice my blending with multiple colours, which is something that I don't really feel like I've done much of so far within my studies. When I first started blending it felt very Monet-ish, like it was very splotchy and the colours were really dotted together, not really blended together, and then as I kept blending it smoothed out a bit, and I'm really happy with how it turned out, I think. Now as you can see, that little purple area at the bottom of the lip, there was some real purple that I could see in the lip in the reference image, but I could just not get that purple to lay down well, and that area in general I just struggled to get opaque with the paint. I don't know if it was the paint itself or if I just maybe had a funny bit of paper. I think it was the paint. I don't think the paper would have really affected it as much as it would if I was using watercolour or something. But yeah, as I said, painting the tongue really helped to bring more depth into the painting, and I think I was just stuck in a bit of rut trying to get one particular part of the painting to look good without looking at the rest of the painting. And once I was able to look at the entire painting and work on it as one piece rather than just focusing in on small aspects of it, I found it a lot easier to paint. But I think that is all I have to say for these paintings today. I really enjoyed them, and I've enjoyed using my new gouache palette a lot as well. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. I'm uploading every week at the moment. My Instagram will be linked down below if you want to see more of my artwork and more behind the scenes as well. I'm pretty excited about the next 2 videos that I have planned. We're looking at doing a gouache portrait and a watercolour painting over the next 2 weeks, so if you want to see them, click on that notification bell so you don't miss out. And make sure to stick around to the end of the video if you want to see some close-ups of the final pieces. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.